chuckled when she stepped through the doors, judged her clothes, questioned her presence. One even assumed she was there to drop off lunch. No one knew the truth, that the woman they were mocking was about to rewrite their entire reality. She wasn't just a guest, she was the storm they didn't see coming. Michelle Reed, a poised black woman in her 30s, wore a navy blazer, white blouse, and a sleek pencil skirt. Her hair, tied into a sharp high bun, mirrored her precision. Every inch of her presence spoke volumes. She wasn't here to impress anyone, she was here to lead. At 8:45 a.m., she walked to the reception desk, briefcase in hand, and greeted the young blonde receptionist with a calm, "Good morning. I'm Michelle Reed. I have a 9 a.m. strategy meeting on the 32nd floor." But the receptionist didn't look up, just kept typing, as if Michelle didn't exist. Michelle tried again, firmer now. "Can you please check the guest list?" Still no acknowledgement. People passed by, glanced, but said nothing. It was as if the air had agreed to stay silent. Michelle's heart beat faster, but she didn't waver. She stood tall, her voice clear. "I've been invited to the 9 o'clock meeting. Please direct me to the conference room." Only then did the receptionist glance up, lips tight, voice barely audible. "Step aside. I'll check when I'm done." Michelle stepped back, glancing at her watch. 15 minutes to show them all who she really was. But this wasn't just about a delayed entry. It was about everything she had fought through, those quiet slights, the overlooked achievements, the doors that opened slower for women who looked like her. Then came a voice, loud and cold. "Service entrance is in the back. You need to leave this area now." She turned. A security guard in his 60s, face hardened by years of authority, eyed her like a threat. His badge read Frank Kinley, head of security. His stance said he wasn't asking. "I think there's been a mistake," Michelle replied, calm but firm. "I'm Michelle Reed, here for the leadership meeting." Frank's eyes narrowed, lingering too long on her briefcase. "Executive floors for authorized guests only. You're not on my list. Step around back. I'll verify when I get the chance." Michelle felt the heat rise in her chest, but she knew this wasn't the moment to raise her voice. This was the moment to hold it steady. What none of them realized was that the real meeting hadn't started yet, but it would, and Michelle Reed was about to chair it. "I have an official invitation from Mr. Calloway's office," Michelle said calmly. "All the meeting details were confirmed last weekend. There may be an issue with your system. Please check again." Frank, the head of security, scoffed. "I've been here nearly 30 years, ma'am. Mistakes like that don't happen." The way he said ma'am wasn't respectful. It was a warning, one she'd heard before, a reminder that someone like her, a black woman with authority, wasn't welcome here. A cold silence settled in as staff nearby paused, watching, not helping, just observing. Frank's hand tightened around his radio. "I won't say it again, Miss Reed. Go to the back entrance, or I'll have you removed." Michelle gripped the handle of her briefcase but didn't move. She met his glare without blinking. "I understand your position," she said, steady and firm, "but I know my rights. I'm not leaving until someone verifies my invitation." Frank looked momentarily caught off guard, unprepared for her resolve. He raised his radio again, posture rigid. "If you won't move, I'll call backup." Michelle didn't budge. This wasn't just about her. It was about everyone like her who had ever been treated as less. Her watch chimed. 8:50 a.m., just 10 minutes until a meeting she'd spent weeks preparing for. And here she was, in a polished lobby, defending her right to belong. This wasn't just a glitch. It was the beginning of a bigger reckoning, one that would expose not just Frank or Teresa, but a deeper current running through Callister and Rose. Finally, Frank turned and walked off to check her credentials, casting one last suspicious glance over his shoulder. Michelle exhaled, adjusted her blazer, and made her way toward the executive elevators. Her heels echoed softly through the marble corridor. Waiting ahead were three sharply dressed men in bespoke suits. In their center stood Greg Saunders, Director of Strategy, celebrated for his brilliance, infamous for his arrogance. As Michelle approached, the group fell quiet, eyes narrowing. Greg smirked. Did Callister and Rose start letting food delivery up here now? His friends chuckled. Michelle stayed composed. I'm not here to deliver anything, she said. I'm Michelle Reed. I was invited to the 9 a.m. strategy meeting. Greg raised an eyebrow, amused. He stepped forward, voice full of mock politeness. Oh, you sure you're not lost? This floor's for senior leadership. Assistants and support staff usually meet downstairs. Michelle met his gaze. I know exactly where I am, Mr. Saunders. I told you, I'm expected. Greg looked at his watch, loud enough for everyone to hear. There's no Michelle Reed on today's list. Are you sure you're not just hoping to crash the party? His colleagues laughed again, like schoolboys impressed with their own cruelty. Michelle took a breath, her voice sliced through the noise. Then, perhaps you should check again. I'm certain Mr. Calloway knows who I am. That name landed. For a second, Greg's confident mask cracked, but only for a moment. He turned to his friends and said, loud enough for her to hear, she thinks name-dropping Calloway will change everything. Everybody wants in on this floor's glory. But what none of them knew yet was, Michelle wasn't hoping for a seat at the table. She was here to lead it. Greg's colleagues laughed again, clearly enjoying the humiliation. Michelle tightened her grip on her bag, forcing herself to stay composed. Then she lifted her chin, met Greg's eyes, and said, with steady defiance, You can think whatever you want, Greg, but I'm not going anywhere until someone in charge confirms I belong here. Let's see how confident you are then. Greg raised an eyebrow, briefly thrown off by her resolve, but he recovered quickly. His grin sharpened as he stepped in, voice lowered, but every word a threat. All right, Michelle Reed, we'll find out soon enough who doesn't belong. But I'll give you a warning. People who force their way into places they weren't meant to be, that never ends well. The elevator doors slid open. Greg and his two companions stepped inside. But before the doors closed, Greg turned back for one final look, part threat, part disbelief, before disappearing behind the steel. Left alone in the lobby, surrounded by curious onlookers and silent judgment, Michelle realized her battle was only beginning. Her real opponent wasn't just Greg. It was the culture that let men like him thrive. A system that dressed itself in prestige but operated on quiet exclusion. Just as she steadied herself to return to the desk, a voice rang out behind her, cutting through the air like a blade. Wait a second, Michelle. I forgot something. It was Greg again, stepping out of the elevator with a smirk. His friends trailed behind, eager to see what he'd say next. He strolled forward, voice dripping with condescension. Michelle, I almost missed it, but you do realize, right? Senior-level meetings require a certain standard. We don't do casual around here. His eyes flicked down to her tailored blazer, as if it offended him. That outfit? May be fine for a school board meeting, but here, on the 32nd floor, it's not exactly the image we go for. Soft laughter echoed from his crew, the kind that stings more than it roars. Michelle felt the weight of every eye in the lobby pressing in on her, some judging, some just waiting for a reaction. Greg wanted her to break, to feel small, but she wouldn't give him that. Lifting her head, Michelle met his stare with quiet power. I believe professionalism is shown through how you act, not how expensive your clothes are, she said evenly. But if you truly think my outfit disqualifies me from being heard, that says more about your standards than mine. Greg blinked, momentarily disarmed, but then his smile returned, colder now. Confidence is cute, he sneered. But confidence doesn't override policy. You're not on the list, Michelle. You don't belong in that room. He looked around, speaking loud enough for everyone nearby. And if you keep standing here, blocking access, I'll have security remove you. I don't think you want that kind of scene." Michelle's pulse pounded, but her voice stayed calm. "I know exactly what I'm doing here, and I suggest you check with Mr. Calloway before you make any more assumptions." Greg's jaw tensed. He turned to a junior staffer nearby. "Call security. I'm done wasting time." The young staffer hesitated, eyes darting between the two, then reluctantly reached for his phone. The tension was unbearable. But Michelle? She didn't move an inch. That silence for Michelle became a shield. It held her dignity intact, even as the storm swirled around her. But she knew this wasn't just about Greg Saunders. This was about a system, one that quietly tolerated bias behind polished doors and polished titles, and she made herself a promise right then. She wouldn't back down, not today, and when the truth surfaced, people like Greg would have nowhere left to hide. The tension thickened. Every nearby glance turned toward Michelle, curious, judgmental, hushed whispers dancing in the air like static. The quiet felt suffocating, and just as it seemed unbearable, a sharp voice rang out from the corridor. "Wait, please stop right there." Heads turned. It was Jennifer Brooks, the senior assistant to the board, decisive, composed, and clearly furious. She strode across the lobby with urgency, face tight with regret and authority. Reaching Michelle, she didn't hesitate. "I'm so sorry, Miss Reed," she said breathlessly. "I tried to reach reception the moment I heard, but I didn't get here in time." Then she turned to Greg. "Greg, what is going on? Do you even know who you're speaking to?" Greg faltered. His smug posture cracked. He scrambled to recover. "Jennifer, I was just doing my job, making sure our executive space stays secure." But Jennifer was already reaching into her satchel. She pulled out an envelope, crisp and official, and held it out to him. "This," she said, her voice sharp, "is Michelle Reed's invitation. She is Mr. Calloway's special guest, a senior strategic advisor, handpicked by the board to preside over today's meeting." Greg took the envelope with a hand that trembled. He opened it, eyes scanning the paper, searching for any loophole, any mistake. But the signature was clear. The seal was real. There was no denying it. His color drained. Still, pride clinging to him like armor, he forced a smile. "I'm sure this was all just a misunderstanding. I was simply being cautious." Jennifer shook her head. "No, Greg, this wasn't caution. It was carelessness, and it will be reported." She turned back to Michelle. "Miss Reed, again, my deepest apologies. We will take appropriate action." Michelle gave a composed nod. Her expression was steady, but her words carried weight. "I hope you understand, Greg, that this wasn't just a mistake. Your behavior didn't just insult me, it harmed our company's integrity." Greg said nothing, his ego wounded, his authority exposed. He looked around, but found no support, just silence. Jennifer turned to the watching employees. "Everyone, please return to your duties. This meeting is about to begin." People scattered quickly, but a few couldn't help casting glances over their shoulders, at Michelle and at Greg. Jennifer gently placed a hand on Michelle's shoulder. "Let me take you upstairs. They're waiting." Michelle nodded, stepping into the elevator, aware of Greg's eyes still fixed on her, conflicted, defensive, angry. But that wasn't her concern anymore. As the elevator climbed, Michelle took a deep breath. Her name was finally recognized, her role confirmed, but she knew better than to think the battle was over. Real change wasn't about paperwork, it was about culture. And people like Greg would only begin to understand when they saw the impact of their bias, exposed in daylight. The elevator doors opened to the 32nd floor. Michelle stepped out, composed, ready, and no longer silent. The glass doors parted, revealing the full executive lineup of Callister and Rose, faces that held the true power of the company, all turning in unison as Michelle entered. The air in the room was electric, charged with tension and curiosity. Michelle placed her briefcase gently on the table and pulled out an envelope bearing the unmistakable red seal of the board and Robert Calloway's signature. Standing tall, voice steady and resolute, she spoke. "Good morning. I'm Michelle Reed. This is my official invitation from Mr. Calloway, confirming that I've been asked to preside over today's strategic meeting as senior advisor to the board." A hush fell across the room. The executives exchanged uncertain glances, unsure how to respond. Suddenly, Greg shot to his feet. Without warning, he lunged forward, snatched the envelope from Michelle's hands, and in front of the entire board, ripped it to shreds. The torn pieces scattered across the table like confetti made of contempt. The room froze, mouths dropped open. Greg stood panting, face red, his mask of professionalism shattered by rage. "I don't care whose seal is on that letter," he snapped. "This meeting is not a platform for someone like you to waltz in and take over. I won't let someone unqualified destroy everything I've built." Michelle didn't flinch. Her gaze met his, unwavering. Her voice cut through the stunned silence with chilling precision. "You just proved everything wrong with this company's culture. The bias, the disrespect, the way it hides behind polished titles and perfect suits." Greg opened his mouth, but Michelle raised a hand, her authority now undeniable. "Yes, I was invited by Mr. Calloway, but that's not the point. What matters is that this company stands at a crossroads, and your outburst just showed which direction it's been heading." Her words hit like a cold gust, slicing through every illusion in the room. Executives stirred in their chairs. Some exchanged nervous looks. Others lowered their eyes. Greg's confidence drained from his face. He searched the room for support, but no one met his gaze. Michelle stood firm, her tone somber. "Let this be a warning. If this company continues to be led by those who act like Greg, it won't be a matter of if we fall, but when." Then, without waiting for a reply, she took her seat, hers by right. Silence fell again. But it wasn't just discomfort anymore. It was realization, the kind that changes everything. Greg, stunned, gripped the edge of the table. He had never been so exposed. The very arrogance that once gave him control had now left him isolated. Michelle rose once more and walked calmly out of the room, leaving a stunned board behind. Greg attempted to recover, forcing a grin. "See?" he scoffed. "Sometimes you have to be firm to keep things in order." No one laughed, no one agreed. And then, the doors opened again. Michelle returned, this time flanked by Eleanor Blackwood, the powerful chair of the Global Investment Council. Every executive stood in respect, everyone except Greg, who went pale at the sight of her. Eleanor stepped to the center of the room, her eyes scanning the board. When they landed on Greg, they turned to ice. "I apologize for the interruption," she said clearly, "but this couldn't wait." She turned to Michelle, her expression filled with respect. "Today, I have the honor of formally introducing Michelle Reed, not only as senior advisor, but effective immediately as the new chief." The room held its breath. The company's future had just changed, and Michelle Reed was the one shaping it now. The executive officer of Callister and Rose, with full authority to oversee and reform the company's internal operations. The room froze. Shock rippled through the air like a sudden drop in pressure. Executives stood motionless, some clutching the table for balance, but no one looked more stunned than Greg, his face blanched, knuckles white as he gripped the table's edge, lips parted, eyes wide. He looked like a man watching his world collapse, and he was. Eleanor Blackwood continued, her voice calm but unmistakably firm, as if speaking to Greg directly. "This decision was deliberate. Michelle was chosen by Mr. Calloway and our council, not just for her outstanding expertise, but for the integrity and ethical leadership she brings, values some here have clearly failed to uphold. The message was clear. Her words weren't just an introduction. They were a reckoning. Michelle stepped forward, calm and assured, eyes locked on Greg. "I know this transition won't be easy," she said, voice unwavering. "But I'm committed to restoring Callister and Rose to its core values: respect, equality, and transparency. And let me be clear, Greg, actions like yours will no longer be tolerated here." Greg's face twitched. His confidence had vanished, replaced by raw panic. The woman he had mocked now had the power to decide his fate. Eleanor gave the room one final look. "Everyone here is expected to fully support Michelle Reed. This is not a suggestion. It's a directive from the Global Investment Council." And with that, she turned and left, leaving Michelle standing tall, surrounded by eyes now filled with both respect and caution. Greg stood paralyzed, his once commanding presence reduced to silence. Michelle didn't need to say anything more. The power shift was complete, but she wasn't done. With calm precision, Michelle opened her leather portfolio and placed a thick dossier on the table. Bold letters across the cover read, "Internal Audit Report. Confidential." Her tone was steady, but every word landed like a gavel. "I had hoped this wouldn't be necessary," she said, "but what happened this morning leaves no room for hesitation." She flipped open the report. "Over the past 3 months, under direction from the Global Investment Council, we conducted a full internal audit. The findings are disturbing: multiple ethical violations, a pattern of racial discrimination, repeated abuse of power." Gasps echoed quietly around the table. Michelle's eyes found Greg. He instinctively stepped back. "And I regret to inform you," she said, "that the person most responsible for these violations is you, Greg." The room fell silent. Some executives exchanged uneasy glances. Others simply looked away. Michelle continued, voice crisp. "The report outlines your repeated acts of discrimination, psychological harassment, and misuse of authority, all directed at colleagues you judged unworthy based on your personal bias." Greg opened his mouth. "This is absurd, Michelle. You can't—" But she cut him off. "Don't," she said, cool and final. "We have verified email records, internal security footage, and direct testimonies. The facts speak for themselves." She gave a subtle nod. From the boardroom entrance, a security officer stepped in. His voice was low but resolute. "Mr. Saunders, by order of the CEO and the board, you are suspended effective immediately. Your access to internal systems has been revoked." Greg didn't move, couldn't speak. His gaze darted around the room, searching for support, but no one met his eyes. There was no one left to defend him. Only silence, and Michelle Reed, now in command. The security officer extended his hand, waiting. Greg, now visibly shaken, fumbled for his badge. His hand trembled as he surrendered it. The moment the plastic touched the officer's palm, the large screen behind them lit up with a stark message: "System access revoked." It was over. Michelle didn't flinch. Her expression stayed composed, though inside she knew this reckoning was long overdue. "This," she said firmly, "must serve as a clear message. From this moment forward, any similar behavior will face the same consequences. Callister and Rose will never again tolerate bias, disrespect, or exclusion." Greg was escorted out in silence. The doors closed behind him, like the end of a chapter the company had avoided writing for too long. In that instant, everyone in the room understood. Change had arrived, and Michelle Reed was no longer requesting it. She was commanding it. Her eyes scanned the room, quiet but resolute. "Let this be our true beginning," she said. "A chance to rebuild this company's culture on the pillars of fairness, respect, and full transparency." Nobody spoke, but the message had landed. Then, with purposeful steps, Michelle walked to the control panel and tapped the screen. 2 familiar faces appeared: Teresa, the receptionist, and Frank Kinley, head of security, the very people who had tried to keep her out just hours before. "This," she began, voice steady, "is not just an executive problem. The culture of exclusion starts the moment someone walks through our doors." She turned to face the board. "From the lobby to the top floor, there must be accountability." Teresa and Frank both displayed behavior that has no place in any professional environment, much less one that claims to lead with integrity. She took a breath. Effective immediately, both have been dismissed. A few murmurs passed around the table, surprised that lower-level staff were being held accountable at the same level as leadership. Michelle raised a hand, silencing the room. "This isn't about punishment," she said. "It's about principle. If we're serious about reform, it must be total. Respect isn't reserved for certain titles. It's the standard, and that standard starts now." One executive hesitantly spoke. "Miss Reed, might this be too harsh?" Michelle didn't hesitate. "No, it's necessary. If we ignore the small things, they grow into the very problems we saw today. That will never happen on my watch." Then she set down another folder. "And this isn't just about consequences. Starting today, all managers will complete mandatory ethics training, not as a formality, but as a foundation. Real training, real accountability. And every manager's future here, promotions, bonuses, even continued employment, will depend on anonymous feedback from the people they lead." Every eye in the room locked on hers. No one could pretend not to hear. This is how we begin to rebuild trust, not by saying the right things, but by doing them. The silence was different now, no longer defensive. It was the weight of understanding, and for many, the sting of awakening. Michelle closed the audit folder. "Today isn't about fear. It's about truth, and about choosing to be better. This company can only move forward if every person here is respected, no matter their role, no matter their background." She paused. "And I will not stop until that's true for everyone." Around the table, heads began to nod, slowly at first, then steadily. No one pushed back. No one questioned her anymore. Michelle Reed had arrived not just as CEO, but as the kind of leader this company never knew it needed. And from that day forward, her words echoed like a turning wind. Change didn't knock. It walked in, took its seat at the head of the table, and said, "We begin now." No one questioned Michelle's new policies. Everyone understood. This wasn't just reform. It was rebirth. Within weeks, change became visible. Posters with the new mantra, respect, transparency, fairness, lined the halls, but they weren't just slogans. Michelle made sure they meant something. She didn't lock herself away in the CEO's suite. She walked the floors, sat in team meetings unannounced. From interns to senior staff, every employee now felt seen. And when she entered a room, it wasn't fear she brought. It was focus, trust, hope. At one product development session, Michelle appeared without warning. There was a moment of surprise, then a quiet shift. "I'm not here to evaluate," she told them. "I'm here to listen. I want to hear from the people who actually build this company." That changed everything. Employees who had been invisible for years began to speak up. Ideas flowed. Voices once muted by bias or self-doubt finally found space. Michelle took notes, asked questions, and always made a point to spotlight those previously overlooked. One of them was Rachel Evans, a quiet analyst who had never been given a major project. Michelle insisted she lead one. Within weeks, Rachel's brilliance shone, winning praise across departments. But Michelle made it clear, this wasn't about revenge or ego. "This isn't punishment," she told her managers. "This is survival. If we don't build a fair system, we won't last. It's that simple." Her words landed hard. Managers began examining their own actions. Defensiveness gave way to reflection, and Michelle wasn't done. She launched the ethics training she'd promised, with respected experts and real accountability. Anonymous 360-degree feedback soon followed. For the first time, employees were safe to speak truth. Some managers were shocked by their low ratings, but it was a wake-up call. For others, the high scores reinforced that true leadership was rooted in respect. Bit by bit, the company changed, not just on the surface, but in the mindset of its people. Michelle knew real transformation took time, but the guarded stares that had once followed her through the lobby were gone, replaced by respect, belief, a sense of possibility. That, she knew, was the true legacy she was building. And while Callister and Rose thrived under her steady hand, outside those walls, another story quietly unfolded. The story of Greg Saunders. Once at the top, Greg had fallen hard, and when Michelle offered him a quiet resignation instead of a public firing, many were stunned. But she was firm. "I'm not here to shame you, Greg," she told him. "What matters most is whether you have the courage to face your mistakes, not run from them." Her words hit deeper than anger ever could. For days, Greg disappeared. Then quietly, he accepted. No press release, no attention. He simply stepped away. Months passed. People forgot. Callister and Rose soared. Then, one quiet evening, a video surfaced, and it went viral. Greg stood in a simple t-shirt in a modest room, surrounded by young students, many of them from backgrounds he once would have dismissed. There was no bravado, no bravura. He was teaching them how to pitch, how to think strategically, how to lead, and then he paused. "There's something I need to say," he began. "In the past, I was part of the problem. I judged people by the wrong standards. Bias, appearance, comfort. I thought success only belonged to those who looked like me, thought like me. But I was wrong, completely wrong." He looked them in the eyes. "I lost everything because I believed that lie. But I'm here to help now, to listen, to guide, and to make up for what I once stood for." And in that moment, the story of Michelle Reed's impact came full circle, because real change doesn't stop at policy. It ripples into redemption. The video of Greg's confession spread across the internet like wildfire. Thousands shared it. Thousands more commented, stunned by his vulnerability. Rarely had someone in his position, once powerful, once untouchable, so openly admitted his wrongs. A few days later, a local news station sat down with Greg. In plain clothes, he spoke without ego. "I've had time to reflect," he said quietly. "I used to think power was about controlling outcomes, but Michelle Reed showed me that real leadership is about lifting others up, especially those who've been pushed down." His voice trembled slightly. "I know I can't rewrite the past, but maybe by helping young people overcome the biases I once upheld, I can build something better." That interview marked a turning point. Greg didn't disappear. He kept showing up, teaching workshops, mentoring students, guiding the next generation. Slowly, he became a symbol not of failure, but of redemption. At Callister and Rose, Michelle referenced Greg often, not to shame him, but as proof that change is real. "It's never too late," she told her teams. "If Greg Saunders can face his mistakes and grow, any of us can." That's what leadership truly means. Greg, once the obstacle, had become a case study in courage, a reminder that redemption isn't just possible, it's powerful. Months later, Greg appeared on national television. The man who once embodied arrogance stood calmly in front of millions, speaking with clarity and grace. "Michelle Reed changed my life," he said. "I used to see difference as weakness. I thought leadership was about keeping control. But I was wrong. Michelle didn't try to destroy me. She gave me space to see myself clearly." He paused. "When I left Callister and Rose, I was bitter, ashamed. But Michelle never mocked me. She didn't seek revenge. She offered something much harder, empathy. And that changed everything." His voice grew steady. She showed me that real power isn't about crushing someone. It's about helping others find a better way forward. The interview went viral, not because Greg was famous, but because his story was honest, human, hopeful. At Callister and Rose, when employees replayed Greg's words to Michelle, she didn't gloat. She smiled softly, then returned to her work. Because for Michelle, this was never about the spotlight. It was about building something real. She continued showing up in small meetings, asking questions, listening, and most of all, ensuring that nobody ever felt invisible again. Under her leadership, the company didn't just grow in numbers, it grew in heart. The culture shifted, diversity became strength, fairness became standard, respect wasn't an aspiration, it was the baseline. And one day, in a full company gathering, Michelle stood before the entire team and said, "When I arrived, many assumed I was here to punish, to make a point, but I never came with anger. I came with hope. I wanted to build a company where everyone's worth is seen, where everyone belongs." She paused, eyes searching the crowd. Greg Saunders once represented everything that needed to change, but today, he represents what's possible. Because when we have the courage to face ourselves, transformation is always within reach. Applause rose slowly, then all at once. It wasn't just polite, it was deeply felt. Over time, Michelle and Greg never crossed paths again. But their shared story traveled far, retold in classrooms, boardrooms, and mentorship circles. Together, they showed that it's never too late to start over. That dignity, forgiveness, and growth are not just ideals, but the foundation of any truly great journey. If this story moved you, please like, share, and subscribe, because the world needs more reminders that healing is possible and that change begins with courage. Thank you for watching. See you in the next story.